everyone. We can cut the first part off, but anyway. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Giving You Keys to Homeownership. I'm your host, Kimberly Watson Johnson, and thank you for tuning in. Today, we are speaking with Patrick Hand with Trusted Title. Patrick is here to explain what part does the title company play in the home buying process. Patrick, please introduce yourself to our audience and explain exactly what you do.
Well, thank you for having me, Kimberly. My name is Patrick Hand. I am one of the owners of Trusted Title. And as a real estate title company in Florida, what we do is we handle the sale, purchase, and mortgage of real property. Whether it's pursuant to a purchase and sale contract or pursuant to an order for a refinance of a mortgage. Those are the main things that we do as a title company.
Okay. So you help people get the property.
We help to make sure that the seller is selling the property to the purchaser, that we know who the seller is, we know who the purchasers are, we know who the realtors are, we know who the lender is, and we bring everybody together. We make sure that everybody is doing their part to facilitate the transaction. We basically supervise the sale or the purchase or the mortgage from start to finish.
You're a babysitter, but anyway.
There's some of that. There is some of that.
Okay, so I want to get a little bit more in depth for the audience so we can kind of give them a good idea exactly what you do. So in Florida, I know we use title companies. A lot of other places use lawyers, and they'll be like, do I need a lawyer? And I try to explain to them, you can get a lawyer if you like, but for the majority of it, the title company here in Florida handles everything for us.
In Florida, there are two different types of title companies. There is an attorney-based title company where you have a lawyer, just like in other states, who is the head agent, the agent in charge of your title insurance company.
Okay.
There are also title agent-based title companies where you don't need to be a lawyer. What you need to do is you need to pass what's called the Florida Title Agents exam.
Okay.
It's like it's an insurance exam. It's a title insurance exam. And if your agency gets certified by the state and you as an individual get licensed by the state as a title agent, you don't need to be a lawyer in Florida. You can pass acts of sale, you can handle mortgages, you can handle the real estate transaction from start to finish as a title agent without being a lawyer.
Okay. So let's break it down in step by step exactly how this whole process works.
Okay.
What do you do?
Typically, the way it's going to begin is a real estate agent or somebody else will deliver to us a purchase and sale contract.
Okay.
So we get the purchase and sale contract and we print it and we start looking at a bunch of things. Okay. Who are the sellers? Who are the buyers? Who are the realtors? Is there a loan? Does the buyer have cash or does the buyer need to take out a loan to help the buyer purchase the property? We're finding out all these things. We make contact with the sellers. We make contact with the buyers. We make contact with the real estate agents. We make contact with the lender if there is one.
Okay.
First thing we do is we make sure that everybody knows who we are, that we're handling the transaction, and everybody gets looped in on an email chain so we can all communicate with one another more easily. Email has become the preferred method of contact, as you know. We still make and receive phone calls all day long. But we try to get everybody on one email chain so that we can. You're going to separate buyers from sellers because there's certain information from the seller that you can't give to the lender, or that you can't disclose to the buyer. So there's going to be separate chains for sellers, buyers. But we're facilitating everybody.
Okay.
We're making sure the seller is actually going to sell the property and no longer be the owner. And we're also making sure that the seller is the only rightful owner, that they're the only person or persons who have the right to sell the property. We're making sure that nobody else is an owner or a partial owner or a sole owner of the property. So the seller listed on the contract, we need to make sure that they are the actual owner.
Okay. So the first step is the introduction.
Correct.
Now that we've made introductions, what do you do next?
We're ordering a title search of the public records.
Okay.
What we're looking to do with the title search is we're confirming ownership. We got to go back on a sale. We have to go back at least 30 years in the chain of title. So we want to know A sold to B, sold to C, sold to D, sold to E, and then sold to the current owner, who is the seller on the contract. We need to make sure that that chain of title is clear, that all of the deeds in the chain of title were executed properly according to Florida law, were recorded properly, and we make sure that the sale is perfected, that the buyer actually becomes the sole owner of the property.
Okay.
That's one of the things that we do.
Okay. So introductions are made, and now we're getting ready to get into the meat and potatoes.
The title search.
Okay, so the title search is where you're going back 30 years?
Correct. Determining ownership, and we're determining any encumbrances, meaning are there any mortgages on the property? Are there any money judgments against the property? Any liens? Any federal tax liens? State tax liens? Homeowners association liens? Condo association liens? Contractors liens? Any of those kinds of things that the seller incurred while the seller owned the property, or a previous owner might have incurred it, that's still sitting out there. We need to make sure that all of those things are taken care of, released in the public records, paid down to zero, so that when the buyer acquires the property, none of those things are there.
Okay.
They acquire 100% ownership, free and clear of all encumbrances. There's no mortgages, no judgments, no liens, no taxes, nothing bearing upon the property that we find in our title search of the public records.
Okay, so we search the title with public records.
Right.
Okay, that's step 2 then.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the other searches that you do, are there other searches
Yes.
other than just the public records? Do you?
Florida's unique.
Okay.
I'm not sure if any other states also allow for this, but Florida allows for unrecorded liens in certain circumstances to serve as actual valid liens against the property. Most states require liens, judgments, mortgages. They're all liens, but they're called different names, to be recorded in the public records.
Okay.
Florida allows for certain items that aren't recorded to still serve as valid liens against the property, such as unrecorded code enforcement liens, unpaid utility bills that are due to the county or to the city government. Open permits need to be closed out before the sale can go forward. So those are 3 things that we're looking for in the municipal lien search.
Okay.
Once we do the title search and we have the municipal lien search, we prepare what's called the commitment.
Okay.
The commitment outlines what we're going to do.
All right.
We're going to sell the property from A to B. We're going to make sure that the property is clear, that the ownership is clear, and the encumbrances are clear from A to B. We issue a title insurance policy to ensure that ownership is transferring and that there are no clouds or any defects in the title.
Okay.
At least anything that's visible, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail.
Okay.
Beyond the title insurance for the owner, we're also, if there's a loan, we're going to be issuing title insurance for the lender as well. So that's the reason that we're making sure that ownership is clear and there are no mortgages, judgments, no encumbrances. We need to make sure those things are accurate so that we can insure the title and we can also insure that the lender
Okay.
against any risks relative to their loan.
Okay.
That's what the lender's title insurance policy is.
So there's 2 separate policies.
Correct.
One is going to be for the owner of the property, the person that's buying it.
Correct.
And the other one is basically for the lender if there's going to be a loan.
If there's a loan.
Okay, so now the difference between the two, I think you touched on it, but it kind of missed me in regards to what is the difference between the two?
Title insurance for the owner is going to cover the owner for what are called hidden defects in the ownership history of the property. So an example that I give people a lot of times is, there's 2 main examples that I give. Let's say 20 years ago, the owner of your property lived in New York and was a snowbird, came down here during the winter. In the month of May, let's just call him Joe Smith.
Okay.
Joe Smith was back in New York. His next door neighbor knew he wasn't coming back until November or whenever he was coming back. And the next door neighbor decides to go get a notary and get 2 witnesses and pretend like he's Joe Smith and signs a deed and sells the property and just takes off with the money.
Okay.
And then the property gets sold to somebody else, and then the property gets sold to somebody else, and the property ultimately gets sold to our seller who's listed on the contract.
Okay.
That forgery could be considered a hidden defect. We didn't know, we can't tell by looking at the document that it was a forgery. The only people who know it was a forgery are the people who participated in the forgery.
Okay.
Therefore, that forgery would be considered hidden in the public records.
Okay.
So if Joe dies, let's say Joe dies, and Joe's son comes forward after we complete our sale, and let's say his name is Mark. Mark comes forward and says, my dad didn't sell this property. I own it as his rightful heir. Title insurance would kick in if he has a valid claim. If Mark is really a rightful owner of the property, and Mark's ownership interest was hidden in the public records because of that forgery, title insurance would kick in and pay a claim, and pay basically the person who says they have an interest in the property, title insurance would pay them to go away.
Okay, so
the purchaser
they
would
pay
have to
back.
give the property
That's
back.
That's what was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
So
protects the purchaser.
It protects the purchaser. So that person gets paid to go away, and I get to keep my house.
You don't have to give a percentage of the money back. You don't have to give the
touching the
property
microphone and
back.
that stuff.
And that segues into lender's title insurance, because the owner's title insurance policy makes sure that ownership is clear.
Okay.
And the lender's not giving the money to the buyer until the lender knows that the buyer is the rightful owner of the property.
Okay.
And we have a title insurance policy that we're committing on the commitment to issue that policy covering the ownership aspect. Only after that does the lender say, okay, now I want my lender's title insurance policy. What the lender's title insurance policy is going to cover for or other loans, other liens that might be unrecorded or might be hidden in the public record. So we're confirming that they're going to be in first lien position, that their mortgage is going to be the only one standing in the event that the borrower doesn't pay and they have to foreclose.
Okay, got you. Okay.
So we're ensuring ownership and we're ensuring first lien position.
Okay, gotcha. Whew, that was a lot. All right, so now that we've established that, so we've done the meet and greet, the loan, the title insurance, the loans. Okay, what's the next step that comes down the pipe?
We have to, once we get the title commitment back, or the search back, and we prepare the commitment, we may have requirements to meet. We may have a deed that's necessary or a death certificate that needs to be recorded or something to clear up a problem in the chain of title.
Okay.
So we're looking to, if the title isn't clear, the chain of title isn't clear, we need to make sure that it is.
Okay.
So we have to do what's necessary to clear that. We have to do what's necessary to make sure that the lender is going to be in first lien position. We need to identify, are there any other judgments? Are there any other liens? Are there any other mortgages? If there are, we need to call up the creditors on those liens and find out what's the payoff.
Okay.
We have to pay $80,000 to get rid of that mortgage. We need to pay $6,000 to get rid of that lien. We need to pay $5,000 to get rid of that. So we're determining what the payoffs for all the liens are.
Okay.
That's one of the things that we do. We have to find out, does the lender going to require a survey? We have to find out if the seller has one that can be used. If they can't, then we need to order a new one. We have to find out if there's any open permits, any unrecorded code enforcement liens. Those things are if they're there, we need to make sure that they're closed out or that they're paid down to zero. We are finding out, is there a mobile home on the property?
Okay.
There's different rules and regulations we got to follow if there's a mobile home. What else are we doing?
I don't know. You got to tell me.
Homeowners associations.
Okay.
Is there a homeowners association for the neighborhood? Do they
Okay.
have rules and regulations? Because anytime you're dealing with a homeowners association, you have to request what's called an estoppel certificate.
Okay.
And basically what that does, it's a note from a letter from the homeowners association that says, this is the information that the buyer is going to need in order to comply with our rules and regulations. So they send that to us. They let us know if there are any past dues that are due. If there's anything that the seller hasn't done as far as paying dues, we need to make sure that that's covered as part of the transaction. So we have the homeowners association, we have surveys, we have the lender to deal with as well. So once we get all the title done, we know what the payoffs are, we know whether a survey is needed, then we deal with the lender. We have to make sure that our numbers for the transaction, the sale price, all the different items that are being paid for by the seller, all the different items that are being paid for by the buyer, that all of our numbers match the same numbers that the lender has.
Okay.
So we create a document that's called a closing disclosure, or a CD. And our CD has to balance with the lender's CD before the transaction can be completed. So there's a lot of numbers that need to change hands. Everything that we're doing as a title company, we're gathering all these numbers.
Yeah.
These are items the seller has to pay. These are items that the buyer has to pay. Then the lender is going to have their fees as well.
Okay.
So we have to get all that from the lender and make sure that that's all on one comprehensive closing disclosure that lists all the numbers for the seller and all the numbers for the buyer, who's paying what, how much money does the seller ultimately get at the end of the day, how much money does the buyer have to put up in addition to the buyer's mortgage if the buyer is getting a mortgage. So we work out all those numbers with the lender.
Okay.
Okay?
Oh,
Yeah.
I will be honest, me as a realtor, your job is very intricate. Very intricate. All I get to do is call you and be like, hey, I got a contract. We got a contract. We got an extension.
Yeah.
Okay. Price change. That's my gist of all of this.
And every time we get that, every time we get a price change, or every time we get a different loan amount, or we get a different close, we have a lot of documents need to be changed.
Okay.
Commitments have to be redone. Just different things that may need to be adjusted. Anytime we get a new loan amount,
Okay.
we get asked for new title work. So we'll update a commitment. We'll update the payoffs. We'll update. Sometimes we have to if we get an extension, sometimes our payoffs will expire. So there's a whole bunch of things we need to keep up with.
Okay.
Throughout the transaction because we're supervising it. We're making sure that the seller is getting us all the information. Babysitter.
You know you're a babysitter.
I don't like using that term. But
You're
that's
babysitting paperwork, though, not as in people. I don't mean it as in you're babysitting people. I mean like the paperwork, because just sitting here listening, I know the process that goes on, but just sitting here listening to the process, even it has me sitting here like, oh my God. You got to know this, you got to do that, you got to go over here, you got to go. And what if, and then you explained if someone pops up out of the blue where they come from, what happens with that?
We get a lot of times where a lender will say, yes, I know the contract says the loan is closing and the deal is closing next week, but everybody wants to sign tomorrow. We got to drop everything
and make it happen
for tomorrow.
Make it happen.
That happens all the time, and we don't ever say no.
No.
So if somebody calls and says we need it today, we're trying to make it. We're doing everything we can do to make it happen today.
Okay.
If they need it tomorrow, so we're flying by the seat of our pants a lot of times. Like today, when I agreed to come here, I had a closing thrown on my schedule that was right before I came here. So you never know from day to day. Your calendar could look clear, and then all of a sudden you got 3 loans closing tomorrow that you didn't know were there. Refinances happen a lot that way.
Okay. Well, yeah, let's touch on refinances. But by the way, you make it look good, though, Patrick.
Well, thank you.
Patrick, you make it seem seamless, like, oh, well.
There's
That's
a lot
Patrick,
involved.
y'all. That's Patrick. He's like,
Oh, I can say this. We have an excellent staff.
Okay.
Who
Now-
handles all of this intricate work. Not me.
Okay, so now with a refi, how does it different from everything you've said so far when you refinance a property?
Refinancing, the borrower already owns the property.
Okay.
So we don't have the sale aspect of it.
Okay.
The owner typically already has an owner's policy from when they bought the property, so their owner's title insurance policy is still in effect. Sometimes we can use that policy to give them a lower rate because they're getting a new loan,
Okay.
and we have to issue another loan policy for that new loan.
Okay.
They already have the owner's policy that covers the owner. If that meets certain criteria, we can give them a lower rate called the reissue rate on the title insurance premium for the lender's title insurance policy. So for a refinance, we're making sure that, okay, are they paying off an existing loan? If they are, we need to find out where that loan is recorded in the public records. We need to contact the judgment or the lender and make sure that we get the accurate payoff, because we need to pay that loan down to zero and make sure that this new refinance is the only loan standing, only lien standing once that refinance is completed.
Okay.
So we're getting payoffs, we're checking ownership, we're making sure that ownership is still the same, we're running a title search
Okay.
of the public records. We don't need to run the municipal lien search in a refinance situation in Florida.
Oh.
You have to run it for a sale, but on a refinance, they're not worried about anything that's unrecorded, they're not worried about permits. They're just worried about making sure that anything that's recorded, mortgages, judgments, liens, taxes, that all those things are taken care of before the new mortgage is executed and recorded in the public records. So we're doing the same thing which is the sale and a mortgage for the buyer, or it's the person who already owns the property just getting a mortgage.
Okay.
And in that instance, we wouldn't receive a purchase and sale contract. We would receive what's called a title order or title request from the lender asking us to do the title work for this refinance. They'll give us the name of the owner, the address of the property, the name of the lender, the mortgage amount, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. So have you ever had any surprises that have jumped up at the last minute?
Always. We have
Any good ones, though? We want good ones.
a lot of the stuff that we deal with in mailaways.
Okay.
We deal with a lot of out-of-town sellers, a lot of out-of-town buyers. Like today, we had one where one of the buyers, the wife was in Arkansas, the husband was signing here at the office, and the seller was signing from somewhere else altogether. So we had 3 different places facilitating all of it at the same time, making sure that the seller's documents came in before the buyer's documents and before the loan, because the sale has to go through before the before the lender's going to give the money.
Right.
They need to see the executed, certified copy of the warranty deed that transfers ownership. So we're making sure that everybody signs in different locations. So that's a surprise that we weren't looking for.
Okay.
If we hope that people tell us up front, we're going to have signers in different places. Most of the time, we don't find out until a day or two before the closing that this particular signer, whether they're a seller or a buyer, they're going to be in another state or they're going to be in another city.
Okay.
And then we have to mail away by email the documents that they're going to sign, and we need to get a notary to go to them. So those are the kinds of surprises that we get. Surprises as far as we rarely get any surprises relative to surprise ownership or surprise liens. A lot of the surprises come from a realtor telling us something that we didn't know before, or a lender telling us something that we didn't know before, and we have to adjust. And it's not anybody's fault. Stuff pops up.
Of course,
You know,
all the time in this business.
It pops
all
up
the time.
We have new circumstances every day that we're encountering, figuring out ways to get around them, because you don't say no and everything has to be done. You can't say I can't do it. You have to do it. So you do everything possible under the law to get it done as quickly as you can. So we do a lot of that. We're flying by the seat of our pants a lot, getting things done at the last minute.
Well, all of this sounds amazing and like way up here, but you brought it down to a level that makes it very understanding. But at the end of the day, I tell people, tell your realtor to call Patrick.
Yeah.
Patrick, tell people how to reach you, just in case they tell their realtor to call you.
I'm at Trusted Title. My email address is my name is George Patrick Hand III. My email address is G for George, Pat for Patrick, and the number 3 at trustedtitleagency.net. That's the best way to reach me.
Okay.
Direct